Hello again, fellas! Mikognio Christie here, once again, and don't get used to it. Just because I'm back, it doesn't mean it's gonna be forever. I'm pretty much bored, which is why I'm doing this video. And today I wanted to tackle the question of personal versus private property. It's a common topic of conversation between libertarians and socialists, at least from what I've seen. And basically debates on whether or not private property, as libertarians understand it, would be abolished. Because us libertarians don't really see the difference between private and personal property. And that's because the distinction between personal and private property is usually pretty much vague. Now, as I remember it, and I'm sorry, I don't have a source for this particular claim, but I've heard it often enough that it's stuck in my mind, I frequently hear that the distinction between personal and private property is as such. Private property are the things you own. This can be anything from your car, your factory, and any land that you've bought, and otherwise attained through a legitimate means. And your personal property is the stuff that you use on your day-to-day basis. Stuff like toothbrush, cell phone, and, well, perhaps even your car if you only use it to drive around yourself and your family, and maybe your friends. And the closest I got to getting a concrete distinction between these are personal property are the things you cannot use to generate capital. However, I have huge beef with that because simply, well, anything you own can be used to generate capital if you're creative enough. I mean, let's say you use your toothbrush to polish some very fine detail on shoes that you then sell to people who brought them to you for cleaning. I'm sorry, but that toothbrush is now private property and no longer personal. Or what if you own a buzz saw? It is your private property and it would count as your personal property if you only used it by yourself. However, if you allow someone, like, I don't know, your neighbor, to use it for 10 minutes because he wants to cut a plank in half or something and charge him $2 for simply for the electricity and material costs, then I'm sorry, but it no longer is your personal buzz saw. And according to the socialist ideals, personal property should be taken by the state. So at that point, when you've earned $2 from that buzz saw, it is no longer yours. It now belongs to the government. And this pretty much can be applied to anything. Your cell phone, you can use it in web development, or I don't know, testing for your mobile games that you then pop onto the Apple and Android stores. I'm sorry, but you've used your phone to make money. So it's capital, so it's no longer personal, now it's private. And you seriously need to get a better term for this, because not only do these two words sound similar, my brain also interprets them similarly, and because of that I'm having trouble keeping in mind which is private and personal. Fucking seriously, could you not have chosen better words for this? But with that out of the way, we can now actually get into a video which talks about this topic, which is why I'm making this video. First I wanted to give you my stance on this, but now that we actually have someone to respond to, let's get right into it.
Something that confuses many people, especially on the right wing about socialist ideologies, is the concept of private property and how to draw the line between private property and personal property. I would encourage to watch my Why I Hate Capitalism video before watching this.
Skip. In this particular instance, I am going to assume you're going to explain what this is supposed to be about. So, if this video alone is not sufficient to draw the distinction between personal and private, I'm sorry, but you fail.
Since we're not some kind of crazy psychopaths, we do believe that some sorts of property can justify itself.
Agreed. Everything you legitimately own, i.e. made yourself, bought, received as a gift, received as a loan, loaned, or, anything else to that extent. So long as no force against other people was involved in the making of this, or, aside from self-defense, that is legitimate property that you should own.
This is what we call personal property. Why is personal property okay? Well, personal property is the property an individual owns and uses him or herself. Any property that does not require exploitation to be used. It is justified as it does not exploit anyone, and it does not require exploitation to be obtained.
What about force? I'm sorry, but I'm not sure it would be the definition of exploitation to point a gun at someone and demand their toothbrush and their cell phone. I mean, I would still consider it illegitimate property, but it wouldn't be personal property.
Examples might be your phone, toothbrush, glasses, and depending on the economic system we use, also a small piece of production means you use yourself.
So, like I stated previously, the bus saw you own is your private and personal property. Carry on.
So, what is private property then? Private property is exploiting property. It is when you own so large amounts of property, you have to employ others to have it used.
What the dude? So if you own 2 personal bus saws, it suddenly becomes exploitative private property because you cannot use them both at the same time, even though individually both of them count as your private property. Sorry, personal property. See what I mean about the means being too similar?
It is owning the means of production. The private property isn't justified as it is exploitative by itself.
The way you're phrasing it, it sounds like the person who owns the property is the one exploiting things. But what if I have 2 planks of wood and I am in need of a bus saw? If I go to a bus saw owner and ask them to lend me their bus saw for a day, and give them $20 for it and offer to repay them for the entire bus saw in case I damage or break it during my exploitation of their bus saw, apparently the guy who agreed to lend me the bus saw for a little bit of money is still exploiting me. Even though I have the need for planks, I am the one who goes to him, I am the one who makes the offer, and I am the one who benefits from it. I would animate my head exploding, but I'm honestly too lazy for it right now.
But mostly because it requires exploitation to be obtained.
You don't need to exploit anyone to buy a bus saw or 2.
In almost all cases, obtaining private property is impossible by your own labor alone. To have such large amounts of property, you need help from others.
Yes, exactly. And those others get money from you because you're the one requisitioning their help. This is called a wage. And not only that, the people who you request help from know what they're getting into. They know how much they're getting paid. There's numerous laws and requirements that are imposed on you to make sure that these people are paid fairly and their safety is ensured.
If you want to own it privately, you must exploit people to make this possible by hiring them.
So, according to you, as I understand it, paying people a agreed upon amount of money for an agreed upon amount of work, or at least time worked, at an agreed upon standard, it's exploitation. Fucking kill me, mate!
You exploit the workers for simply being worse off than you.
Worse off than me, but not worse off than if they didn't get the job in the first place. So, according to you, as I understand it from what you just said, I am exploiting people if I am earning more money than them. So by this logic, if I was, I don't know, a CEO of a company that makes millions of dollars, I would have to be paid below minimum wage, otherwise I would be exploiting my janitor!
For simply having no other option than to sell themselves to receive a wage.
Normally they would have the option of just working with their own labor to make some means of production, and then using those means of production to make money, to make more means of production, to make more money. Except not everyone is this savvy. I'm sorry, but there's a reason that there's always gonna be jobs for people who are only good at digging trenches. There are trenches that need to be dug, and they don't get paid much because somebody who builds robots for a living can simply build robots for a living. And they won't be easily replaced by somebody who only knows how to dig trenches. But the guy who makes robots for a living can replace the guy who digs trenches only, because he can do both things.
In an anarchist society, private property wouldn't exist, as the means of production would have been owned collectively by the workers.
I'm sorry, but in an anarchist society, nothing would be owned collectively. Because anarchists hate rulers. And in order for there to be collective ownership of something, somebody at the top would have to be making the decisions for it. And that would mean there is a ruler. Unless they do it all entirely by democratic voting, in which can take, depending on the size of the community who collectively owns it, takes several days just to collect the data, at which point it might be too late to make that call. I'm sorry, but this is just a contradictory statement. What you're describing is actually socialism, not anarchy. It is impossible to make a socialist anarchy on a large scale. The biggest thing that it would be a small commune of a couple of people who voluntarily join into it. As such, it wouldn't be exactly a collective. It would be a collection, yes, but not a collective.
Instead of one person owning the means of production and the rest being under his or her command, the workers would have cooperated in creating industries and owned it together.
Okay, so when you have, let's say, 5 people that are trying to make, say, a guitar, and only one of them knows how to manufacture the string, 3 of them work on building the body for the guitar, but let's say that one of them got sick and only put in 1/3 of the work as much as the other guys, and then the last guy just did the paint job. How much of the guitar would these people own? How much does the guitar value have? And if one of them wants to smash it during a rock concert, would at that point the others get to object? Well, no, because the guy who wants to smash it also contributed to working on it. And if it is his property, then he should have the right to do it. But the other 4 people could easily veto it. Or what about if the situation is inverse, then there's the one guy who wants it not to be smashed during a rock concert, because he, I don't know, say wants to play it in next week, but the others insist and outvote him, and thus will make it impossible for him to play the next week, unless they make another guitar. I'm sorry, but without some measure of gauging who contributed how much, this is an impossible scenario to work with. And the best means we have of measuring such a contribution metric is by money. After all, the paint job is, say, the least valuable part of this, because anyone could do it. So let's say the guy who painted it only gets 10%. The one who made the string, who is literally indispensable in this case, would get 50%, and the other 3 guys would have to share the rest according to how much they've contributed to the project. It only seems fair in this sense, but the way you're going about it, it seems to imply that they would all get an equal call in the making of this guitar, which they made with various amounts of effort, work, and the significance of contributions of which all varies highly.
This makes workplace democracy possible. It creates a much higher economic equality, which removes the authority of the rich.
Wouldn't, in such a scenario that you're proposing, the quote-unquote rich guy be the guy who works 16 hours a day on everything, rather than the guys who work 8 hours a day on everything? I mean, he would put twice as much effort into everything and would thus be entitled to twice as big a share of everything, wouldn't he? And thus be the rich guy in the local community. The only thing you're ensuring in this is not prosperity. It is equality in mediocrity, because all of these people would have to be part-time farmers or something. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to specialize, and they wouldn't be able to make money off of their special work. Nobody would have the incentive to get specialties either, because nobody would own anything, so there would be no incentive to care about anything you make, or anything you have, because you could just request it to be replaced the next day, even if you damage or destroy it. And thus I can conclude that your video is pure bollocks, because not only did it fail to properly distinguish between personal and private property, the idea behind the proposed scenarios and outcomes and rules are just ludicrous and completely impractical, and it is literally impossible to implement simply due to the differences between people who would be involved in it.